The city has never seen fear like this. On the eve of New Year 2020, that's when planet Earth stood still. The canisters from the fireworks had a poison that shot up into the Earth's atmosphere, which was originally formed from dangerous chemicals that had reacted with the Earth's oxygen. And during 2020, the world was placed under deep isolation. Over the years, it didn't stop crime from causing problems, as everyday heroes couldn't risk going out to stop thugs and criminals, as all they could do was watch as their cities died and left to be ruined. At some point, secret government organizations had been established to arrest and detain those who wouldn't follow those rules. It had gotten to a point where one of those organizations, dubbed as BOP, served as the founding forces for law and justice. What is unknown to the public is that most of these soldiers are soldiers who were kidnapped as children, trained, and kept in 3 sections: the Crows, the Falcons, and the Swallows. Their armor and equipment had been a main aspect, as the soldiers' ranks were to determine which branch they were addressed by. Sporting battle armor from the Lost Roxxon armor plates and expanding on its technology, along with boom tubes of both mother and father boxes. This universe, the Environment Advancement Project, was created as a direct duplicate of Earth K-64, which is now known as Earth A-92, where heroes from the detective and the Marvel era had coexisted for many millennia until the outbreak. Crime and corruption and global crises had placed these heroes in difficult situations to the point where they were branded as the cause of the world's current disaster, which forced a collective group of government officials all over the world to find, arrest, or kill all heroes while issuing a law that heroism and vigilantism were against the law. In the year 2035, chaos between crime and justice had escalated massively, and those who had survived, the Dark Bat, the Iron Playboy, had left a message in a radio diary. At this moment, if you hear this message, it means we failed, the more enthusiastic voice responded. The other voice cleared his gruff throat and continued. This planet is dying at the hands of chaos and torment. The League and those of the mightiest have one last chance to give those who still believe in the cause for justice a fighting chance. I wish we didn't have to resort to this, but it must be done. Those with the capabilities of time travel and cosmic technology, the world will be rebooted, and this universe will create a world where we are nothing but a myth. The other voice began speaking. If we have any other hope to save you, this has to happen. When the world is safe enough, trust your gut. Trust in those around you, because those are what you will need to see this mission through. It paused for a couple seconds until, good luck, hero, and goodbye. The gruff voice cleared its throat, and the recording had stopped. The ball had quietly tapped against the wall and the floor. A hand gently gripped the ball in the dark before chucking it away again. The light of a torch had shone in some sort of sequence, relatively short like Morse code, and a figure on a desk chair noticed out the window before grabbing some gear and a jacket and walked out. With only the flashlight on, a small group of shadows had emerged in a training arena that had resembled that of a military base, strapping themselves with their quivers and collapsed their bows, taking rapid shots. Some even went towards their targets and picked up their arrows again during fire from other marksmen and women. Their jackets and tracksuits bottoms had sported a crow emblem. "Ooh, impressive as always, babe," a girl excitedly called out as she sat with her friends, talking and shooting their bows, while the boy Daniel had been lifting himself up and down on a pole, letting himself hang there from high above before barrel rolling down, and shrugged before walking over and kissed her cheek. "And you're not so bad yourself, hotshot. Just remember to keep your focus on what's right in front of you," he softly said, guiding his hand softly on her hips and her arm holding the string that had rested on her hand, which caused this girl to chuckle and turn her head to face him. "But I am," she softly said, firing the arrow right through the mannequin's head, before kissing him, and then winked at her friends, who giggled at them. The group had continued shooting arrows and messing around before suddenly hearing footsteps. Taking as much as they could, they hid around the area to see a tired-looking, angry man strut in and looked round, noticing that the mannequins had now filled with holes, and slammed his foot hard down on the ground. "If you asshole kids don't get into bed in the next 10 seconds, you're sharing a cell with each other down in the flat facility," he grunted and left. When the doors closed, small giggles echoed as they hurried off to their rooms. Daniel walked back to his room and sat at his desk, sighing and turned on his holocom, checking his emails boredly before being sent an email attached with an audio message by an unknown sender. "What?" he whispered softly, wondering whether to open it, but had instead sent it to the trash before turning it off and headed to sleep. The sun had risen beautifully frosty. A squadron of crows and falcons had been standing there for the past 2 hours, holding their weapons. Some had held firearms, and some had held other ranged weapons, and today they were being tested on how to survive a fall with simply the equipment brought with them. Daniel sat there in the back, adjusting his arrowheads and his arrows, opening his bag and rummaging through before finding various arrowheads with special shapes, before looking up boredly as the teacher said that they will drop over the city soon. 5 minutes of waiting had finally been up, and the soldiers had been geared up. Ready or not, the teachers gave the okay to the pilots who dropped them down, watching them plummet down to the city. Shrieks and cries rang through the skies all the way down. Some of the soldiers couldn't nor wouldn't do anything compared to those who were capable of getting down safely. Daniel watched everyone who had panicked and shot an arrow through a line of quivers down the skyscraper, which made it easier for those to get down safely. As for himself, he noticed he only had one arrow left, shooting it towards a building that had gripped hold of the concrete just below a group of pedestrians who were just trying to enjoy their day, to see some random black-suited man swinging past them who held tight onto his bow, which had secured itself onto the rope line and jumped off to land on a truck. Daniel looked round as he felt proud with his results, checking his wrist monitor to establish contact with the group, finding out it had been damaged during the landing. "Fuck," he muttered, and looked around. He was definitely lost. He thought back and realized that he had swung himself so far. He reached the south end part of Tech City, the Frayne, the place that had mostly been destroyed since the outbreak. Meanwhile, back at the drop-off point, the point system had tallied the group together, with Daniel being at the top of his class again. Everyone was ready to congratulate him until they noticed that he hadn't arrived, and were now tasked with finding him. Back at base, Gavin Powers, the leading general of BOP, had been checking over the Sentinel-4 program to track crime at 0.4 seconds before all local TCPD branches. A ping sounds a small whistle in the northeast area. A level 2 threat had been pinged. Someone send down a swallow unit to deal with it, please. He spoke into his wrist monitor, and sat back into his seat, silently into space. Daniel walked across the street, hearing the citizens throw shade and hatred towards him and BOP, believing that they were the cause of Earth's disaster and their fates. Daniel scoffed and walked on with his head down. Suddenly, a random man had ran towards him and punched him right across his jaw. Daniel dropped down to his knees as he was kicked around. He got mad enough to grab the random man's ankle and forced his momentum to drop, picking himself up and began beating the man down with his fist and his bow, until he was flashed by a phone. Someone tried to take a picture of him, and sirens began ringing closer in, forcing Daniel to make a break for it and ran into an old rundown building to hide. He panted hard, thinking how was he going to explain any of this to Commander Dix and the General. Daniel hid behind certain large debris from inside the building and sighed, watching the police cars ride into the opposite direction, and sat there and checked if he had seen any other things he could try fixing his wrist monitor. "Oh yeah, I was told to leave my bag on the ship," he muttered. About 3 minutes later, Daniel began exploring the building. He noticed all the computers and server boxes, which to him seemed like fossils compared to his wrist monitor. He scoffed and smirked, looking through the old-looking books and files, till he came across a picture of what looked like men, women in a formation, standing proud with agents. He laughed, seeing a couple aliens also, and shook his head, putting it away and not noticing the mark of shield on the back. "Whoa, straight up ancient," he said, dusting off the keyboard, unknowingly turning on the biggest screen in front of him. A pixelated bat forms before opening. Many files began reboots and downloads. Is our nap over, sir?" a low voice echoed in the room. "What the fu-" Daniel exclaimed, moving back. "A voice? An AI?" he wondered. He tried to examine the old computer. "You're not. Who are you? Where am I? Intruder!" the voice cried out. The various robotic armors and machines lit up and had gone straight for him. Daniel's eyes had widened, noticing a suit of armor jump right in front of him, opening the palm of his hand before shooting a laser, emanating from it. Daniel was knocked back, but the suit he was wearing had a pain absorption, even though it hurt like hell. He stood up and held his bow in his hand like a melee weapon, and tried fighting off the army of robots, wishing he had not used up his arrows on idiots who couldn't stomach a simple training exercise. Daniel dodged and ran across the room, hearing the voice bellow out more orders as some of the suits started to fly. "Oh crap," he said, before acrobatically dodging multiple laser blasts, projectile attacks, and of course, the usual rammings like a mad bull. Daniel went in hiding into the weapon area and was blasted into a shelf of guns and arrows. Almost passing out from exhaustion, Daniel saw his bow from across the room and a pistol right next to him. Grabbing it and held it up right in front of him in anger, shooting nothing as the voice spoken into the robot in front of him. Checking for facial recognition. The armor's arm was raised once again as Daniel tried to get away, before suddenly a transparent red beam had begun scanning him from head to collar, and then sat there utterly confused. "Okay, what the hell is this? What is going on, and who the hell are you?" Daniel angrily called out, throwing the gun at one of the heads of the robots. "That was rude. Mr. Daniel Drake, 17 years old, presumed missing for about 4 years and soldier of..." He gasped softly. "BOP. They're still alive? After all this time?" Checking all files for it. The voice prattled on as the robots walked off, back to where they were and shut down. Daniel walked up there, staggering a little as the computer frantically had tabs of police records, media reports, and news, and finally, all the shield data that he could find. The voice sighed sadly as he started trying to call multiple numbers and with no avail to the computer's side again. "So, I'm alone on this earth?" he said, as Daniel slammed his hands on the desk. "Hey, if you can hear me, I want to know what the hell is going on." The computer chuckled softly. My apologies. I did not mean to try and kill you, but you, soldier, are trespassing on local property." This didn't make Daniel any happier. "This room is special for the base of heroes of all ages and species." Daniel simply stared. The voice cleared its throat. "And my name is Jarvis, or at least a version that a Mr. Starks has brought me from, his trusted friend and ally." This made Daniel think. A different world? Aliens? Are real? Heroes were legal? He had to sit down. He didn't know what he was hearing. Well, wait a second. If heroes exist, what the hell happened to them? He asked the strange computer. You did. More so, BOP happened. Soldiers are mainly tasked to hunt and kill heroes. According to these recent files, the acts of heroism and vigilantism is strictly prohibited. Here. Yeah, it's to keep the peace. We don't want rogue individuals running around in hoods and masks trying to save lives. And local police stations will soon be out of business. The technology we have is enough to save lives, Daniel replied. However, Jarvis had told him that his agency was only there to control and command Tech City, and it could all end up being worse as it could expand into other cities, countries, and maybe even the world. That's not true. We're tasked with saving lives, not controlling people. Daniel walked towards the door, taking his bow and pressed his hand on the door. Can I borrow a change of clothes? He chuckled nervously. The group who had finished their training were allowed to venture off into town, as they looked for Daniel, who none were close to the fray. Timmy was walking with a couple older and tougher men, clenching his gun quite tight, noticing them starting to giggle. What if we just dumped this loser off here? They had muttered to each other, and started walking towards the border between East Hill and the South Side. Timmy, who had no awareness to their plan, followed, and noticed a cheap shop selling cheap snacks, who he had two of, one for him and one for Daniel, if they ever found him. Timmy looked through a couple of buildings, asking around if the residents had seen another one of them, wearing their outfits, who only shook their heads. Meanwhile, the two older men had been bullying the residents in the area. Shut up! Have you seen another crow guy here? One of them had asked. The younger boys had felt quite shaken and intimidated, as they said they saw a man getting floored by a small mob. Timmy heard their conversation and went regardless of waiting for them. As he clenched his shotgun, he was worried because he knew he wasn't the strongest, nor the fastest in the squad. However, he didn't seem to mind about being in support, which made him chuckle as he felt more important, something like an important character in a manga or an action novel. Tommy walked past the building that Daniel had been hiding away in, asking around, but some of them got angry, walking towards him menacingly, before being assaulted by the two older men, who snickered at Timmy's frightened to death face. Thank you, he softly muttered. Ah, shut up, man. We didn't do it for you. It was so we wouldn't get in trouble if we lost you. Yeah, we could have just left you here to get attacked. During his debrief with Jarvis and the Heroes' Hall of Justice, reading up on the heroes' feats and mark of courage on their stone tablets. At the same time, Daniel had been in the process of both cleaning up the mess he and the AI had caused, while also fixing his wrist monitor. He had started a reboot function, but he was stopped when the voice had faded in a symbol of an R shape. Hey, what the hell, man? He screamed annoyingly into his wrist, which to normal people would be regarded as weird. My apologies. I didn't mean to intrude. Do you like the color and the upgrades I've made? The voice excitedly trilled into the watch. Daniel looked and noticed that there were 2 different server ports, one specifically for BOP and one for something called DCAI, which had Daniel perplexed. And what is this program? Never seen anything like it. That program will give you full access to the main computer system here remotely using a TIM program I initiated, if you ever need help from an AI, Jarvis explained, causing Daniel to look at it and shrugged. What if I don't need it? Then it will explode and sever your hand. What? Daniel cried out, worrying for his safety before frowning unamused as soon as he heard him chuckle, as he walked to the door. Now that my shit is fixed, I'm getting out of here, he remarked, opening the door to the lobby room, and sighed as he walked outside. His wrist monitor began ringing, and only GK with 2 heart emojis were on the screen. Daniel smiled happily and swiped up, answering the call. Don't worry, love. I'm coming home now, and I'm safe. Oh my god, I was so worried. You weren't answering your calls, and the search party couldn't find you anywhere. The girl on the other end sounded very worried. Babe, I'm just glad that you're okay, she continued, clearly obsessing. I have to go. Are you coming back? She asked cautiously, which gave Daniel time to respond with a simple yes. Not to worry herself sick, as Daniel made his way back to the train station, flashing his BOP pass, and stepped through. Daniel slept through the train ride back to the compound and collected his thoughts and his dreams, subconsciously remembering flashes of capes and masks being worn, or men and women jumping across buildings, seeing them in the news, or heck, even comic books. He panted slowly the more intense the visions became. He sat up straight, awakening from his nightmares, and looked around only to see a random young woman with beautiful wavy silver hair, staring a little. His face looked a little entranced by the woman as she slowly turned her attention to him and waved sweetly, who reluctantly waved back, and heard the announcement that it had reached its destination, pushing his tired body out of the train through the herd of passengers entering and leaving, lazily catching a glimpse of the female's hair yet again.